The Memorial Foundation welcomes you to the 10th annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Wreath Laying Virtual Ceremony, sponsored by PVH Foundation, Centene Corporation, National Association of Realtors, Wells Fargo, and T-Mobile. Please welcome your host, Emmy Award-winning anchor for WUSA 9, Allison Seymour.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 10th annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Wreath Laying Ceremony. Of course, it's virtual this year, but I am here to tell you that no virus could ever dampen the importance of this occasion. I am honored to serve this morning as your host. My name is Allison Seymour, and I am a morning news anchor here in Washington, D.C. for WUSA 9, but I know that you are joining us from all over the nation, all over the world. So I would like to invite you to please share your remembrances, your thoughts for this day, your tributes on our chat, because we are utilizing all of our virtual platforms. So please share. Right now, though, I would like to introduce our first speaker for today's program, Rabbi Lauren Holtzblatt, excuse me. She is, of course, an esteemed rabbi who you probably recognize from the eulogy of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. But she was ordained at the Jewish Theological Seminary. She's celebrated as for the 32 most inspiring rabbis in the country. And last year, she was named one of Jewish Women's International Women to Watch, and is the current recipient of the coveted Schusterman Fellowship, which is a leading development program for individuals who are committed to growing their leadership in the Jewish community. And again, many of you probably already know this rabbi from her moving and sincere eulogy in honor of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Rabbi Lauren Holtzblatt.
My friends, we have been through a rough year. The world we live in today is a world where the number 846 does not refer to a Bible chapter and verse, but to the amount of time that a white police officer held his foot on and suffocated a black man. Where the number 396,000 does not refer to the amount of steps taken by children this year, but to the amount of souls lost to the coronavirus. And where the number 6 does not refer to the promise of a young life in a world where she can flourish, but to the amount of bullets that killed Breonna Taylor. We have seen darkness this year. We have toiled in it, and we have wrestled with injustice. And here's why we turn to Dr. King, not only on this day where we celebrate his life, but every day when we seek his solace, his words, his resounding voice that sings to us. We go to Dr. King not only because he led this nation to face injustice. We go to him not only because he led the Montgomery bus boycott, and not only because he called out America for what it is and not for what it should be. He made that injustice visible to millions. But we call on him because he could imagine something different. He could reach into the future with a dream. He had a dream. He had a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners would sit down together at the table of brotherhood and, yes, elect a black man to the Senate. He had a dream that one day this nation would rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. He said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal." And he said, way back many years ago, that even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, that he still had a dream. He had a dream that was rooted in the American dream. And dreaming and seeing this world not only for what it is and toiling in the pain of today, but dreaming of tomorrow. That's what a prophet does. A prophet lives not only among the people to understand and feel their pain, but a prophet leads us to tomorrow, to a new day, to a day that is worthy of God's presence, to a day that understands the depth of love that God implanted in every one of our hearts. And a day where we can truly say, as the psalmist said, Kol haneshama tehallel. May we see that redemptive day when every human is treated for the dignity and for the holiness of what each of their lives represent. May we see that day quickly. Amen.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. Our next speaker is Harry E. Johnson, Sr., and Harry serves as the president and CEO of the Memorial Foundation. Harry and his team are credited with raising $127 million to build our beautiful MLK Memorial, and he oversaw its dedication in 2011. 10 years ago. Imagine that. The Memorial Foundation, under his leadership, continues to carry on the themes of the memorial, which are democracy, justice, hope, and love. Mr. Johnson.
Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us on this Martin Luther King Day. I'm Harry Johnson. I am the president and CEO of the Memorial Foundation. We were responsible for raising $127 million and building the wonderful memorial in Washington, D.C. in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We typically meet on this morning in person to lay our wreath and to honor the legacy of Dr. King. We welcome you to our virtual program today. I'm sure you're going to enjoy every minute of it and know that we have some exciting speakers today for you to hear, great music to hear, and how excited we are that this year will be the 10th anniversary of the opening of the Martin Luther King Memorial. We have great things planned for this year. On today, we're planning on giving away love boxes, 1,000 boxes of food to those in need in the DC area. We were also slated to give away 1,000 boxes of love packages to family centers in DC. We postponed that because of the activities that are happening here in DC, but we will do that again or do it on February 13th, Valentine's Day weekend. What better day to do a day of love? Thank you so very much for joining us. At this time, I would like to introduce to you our chair of the board for the Memorial Foundation, Mr. Guy Vickers, who is the president and CEO of the PVH Foundation.
Hi, I'm Guy Vickers, president of the PVH Foundation and board chair of the Memorial Foundation. On behalf of the board of directors, welcome to the 10th annual MLK Wreath Laying ceremony. On this day of reflection, we're highlighting a day of love, one of the 4 tenets of the memorial. PVH and its more than 40,000 associates are proud partners with the memorial. Again, we thank you for celebrating Dr. King's legacy. Please be safe and stay healthy.
Thank you so much, Guy, for those wonderful remarks. Thank you and the board for your years of service to the Memorial Foundation. At this time, it gives me honor and pleasure to introduce to you Michael Nydorf, the president of Centene Insurance Company. Also introducing to you Charlie Oppler, the president of the National Association of Realtors. And finally, we'll hear from T-Mobile and Michelle Prasad. She is the Chief Policy Counsel for Strategic Alliances and External Affairs at T-Mobile.
Hello, I'm Michael Nydorf, Chairman and CEO of the Centene Corporation. I'm honored to commemorate the 10th anniversary and dedication of the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial with all of you. The words of Dr. Martin Luther King have inspired millions around the globe. His message has been heard by men and women who have taken on his charge to confront injustice, change hearts, and transform our world. Centene was founded on a set of values that remain steadfast, and one of these is the belief that everyone deserves access to high-quality, affordable health care with dignity and respect. This belief directly aligns with Dr. King's campaign for human rights for all people and is of particular significance as many struggle during these unsettling times, represented by a global pandemic, uncertain economy, and social injustice. Centene and the Centene Charitable Foundation believe that successful corporate citizenship is defined by investments in institutions and organizations that address the diverse needs of our communities. We support initiatives that focus on inclusion, the whole person, and community development in order to remove barriers facing vulnerable populations. Recognizing the crucial need for a national dialogue around human dignity and civil rights, Centene proudly partners with the Memorial Foundation. The organization Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial in Washington, D.C. serves as a beacon that inspires people around the globe to apply principles of democracy, justice, and hope. We are proud to support the programs and efforts of the Memorial Foundation to ensure Dr. King's memorial not only honors a great man's legacy, but serves to engage the American people, particularly younger audiences, as they face challenges with change, equality, and justice. As we honor Dr. King, I am reminded of a quote on the wall of the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial that has always resonated with me. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. Following Dr. King's mission, I encourage all of you to consider how we can improve the communities in which we live, work, and play. His likeness, his words, and his vision will endure. Thank you.
Hello, I'm honored to join you on behalf of the National Association of Realtors. Our members work every day to further Dr. Martin Luther King's dream of diverse, inclusive communities. Dr. King often spoke of the need to see ourselves not just as members of a neighborhood, but as a brotherhood of man. As a minister, he challenged our country to fulfill its promise to Americans of all colors, and in the words of Scripture, to let justice roll down like water and righteousness to an ever-flowing stream. We remember his words, but even more, we remember his actions. Dr. King spent a year living in Chicago, where he not only campaigned for the passage of a Fair Housing Act, but he braved physical harm marching for it. The Fair Housing Act's passage in 1968, a week after his death, was a memorial to his vision. Unfortunately, the Realtors, who are headquartered in Chicago, opposed its passage then. But today, Realtors are committed to Dr. King's dream. But more importantly, we're acting on it. Today, NAR fights to protect and promote the Fair Housing Act. We're proud that back in 2011, we made the right decision to be among the first to contribute to this memorial's construction. And we're proud to continue our partnership with the Memorial Foundation today to champion fairness and equality in housing and preserve Dr. King's legacy. 5 decades after his death, he remains an inspiration to us all. Those who stood with Dr. King are forever on the right side of history. His dream is the American dream, and that's a dream we fight for every day. Thank you on behalf of the National Association of Realtors.
Hi, I am Jimmy Paschel, and I'm the head of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Wells Fargo. I'm thrilled to be here today because my heritage is in the South, and I grew up knowing who Dr. King was. My father marched with him. And, you know, as I think about the current events of today, I think leaders like myself, my children, are called to engage in the work as well. You know, if I think about my favorite quote from Dr. King, my father and mother talked about him a lot. I think there are 2 that resonate with me. One is that darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can. And the other is that our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. I'm proud to represent Wells Fargo today in our sponsorship of the new pathway that will allow people from all over the world to safely reach the MLK Memorial from the National Mall. The new pathway is a powerful symbol of how we can make it possible for more people to walk in Dr. King's footsteps, to honor his life, legacy, and philosophy of justice, freedom, hope, and love. I want to thank the Memorial Foundation for keeping Dr. King's memory and spirit alive. It is through the Foundation's work, including its Social Justice Fellows Program and Youth Leadership Conference, that will lead to meaningful change in communities around the world. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Michelle Prasad, Chief Counsel for Strategic Alliances and External Affairs here at T-Mobile. Thank you to the Memorial Foundation for this opportunity to support and to participate in this year's commemoration of Dr. King's great life and legacy. Here at T-Mobile, we are proud to support the Memorial Foundation and its mission of promoting and celebrating the life of Dr. King, the memorial, and its mission and tenets of democracy, justice, hope, and love. The theme for this year's Day of Reflection and Reconciliation, love, resonates with us, as does the need for dialogue concerning social injustice. This year and beyond, our team is focused on taking concrete action to accelerate equitable change within T-Mobile and across the country. As a company, we are rethinking how we are doing things, and we are focused on investing in and providing resources to the communities that we're honored to serve. For us, that means meaningful and concrete investments in the 3 Ds: digital literacy, digital equity, and digital inclusion. Now, we understand that this will take time and hard work, just as Dr. King's work continues to take time, as our work to recognize his legacy took time. I'm inspired by many things that my former boss, the late chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Congressman John Conyers Jr., accomplished over his career. But it's his steadfast commitment to getting federal recognition of Dr. King's legacy, which took a decade and a half, is that reminds us all that doing the right thing can sometimes take way too long. T-Mobile has committed to promoting more diverse business practices, including diverse hiring through all levels of the company, deploying a 5G network that is more accessible to underserved communities, and developing and executing on a long-term community investment plan. We laid a strong foundation for equitable change in 2020, and now at the top of 2021, we recognize that this year will be pivotal in making our shared aspirations a reality. Thank you for allowing us to participate today and to be a part of the hard but necessary conversations about love today and beyond. Thank you.
And thank you, Michelle, for those impactful words. I want to remind you, check in with us on the chat. Let us know where you are watching from. I see Seattle, Minnesota, Newport News, Virginia. Also share any thoughts or tributes on this momentous day as we celebrate the life and the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Now, as we all know, music is just woven into the culture, from the struggles for fighting for freedom to all the joy and the triumphs. Music is always and ever present. So it is only fitting that right now we enjoy the heavenly sounds of a beautiful choir. So without further ado, please welcome the Ebenezer AME Choir of Fort Washington, Maryland, under the direction of Clifton Ross III, with the selection, Great Praise.
Can we clap our hands this morning as we give God great praise?
It's a good time to give the Lord a praise. Everybody sing with voices raised. Hail to our King and all the people cry. Jubilee, we win our hearts. Allah, give our great praise. Allah, praise the Lord today. For this is the day the Lord has made. Allah, give our great praise. Allah, praise the Lord today. For this is the day the Lord has made.
It says it's a good time to give God a praise. Everybody sing with voices raised.
Everybody sing with voices raised.
Hail to our King, let all the people cry.
To our King, let all the people cry.
Jubilee, we. Say hello, give God a great praise. Hello, for this is the day. Everybody sing it, say it loud. Give God a great praise. Say it loud. For this is the day. Come on and clap your hands. This is the day that the Lord has made, and we will rejoice and be glad in it. We have something to be grateful for. Come on and put your hands together. Let's praise you. Celebrate the King. Lift your voice. One more time. Say hallelujah. Let's praise you. Come on, celebrate. Give our God great praise. One more time. Say hallelujah. Let's praise you. Celebrate the King. Lift your voice. One more time. Say hallelujah. Let's praise you.
Yes, right. Nothing like music. Nothing like music, right? Ebenezer AME, thank you so much. Under the direction of Clifton Ross III. All right. Now, please help me welcome Joan M. Mooney, the president and the CEO of the Faith and Politics Institute. Ms. Mooney.
Despite the chaos around us today, we understand Dr. Martin Luther King's wisdom that to achieve lasting social change, quote, the means and the ends must be inseparable. His vision continues to prompt us in wrestling with whether we want to be a nation that remains mired in chaos or rise up to become a national community. In the face of all he had endured, the threats and heinous acts he'd witnessed, he believed deeply that people had the agency to participate in their own redemption. He called on all Americans to move forward, not in a culture of denial. He knew history is unchangeable, but with pragmatic optimism. So on this holiday, we have to ask ourselves, how is it that we can build community amid the chaos? Chaos is the brokenness that came from segregation, social oppression, and physical violence. He saw a way through the chaos and called on everyone, white and black, into a higher order, into right relations with each other. Dr. King tried to steer us away from the self-defeating ways of isolation and despair. He told us to guard ourselves against the bitterness. Quote, we need the vision to see in this next generation's ordeal the opportunity to transfigure both ourselves and American society. Dr. King believed that it was possible to go from the chaos of injustice to a community predicated on democracy, which requires right relations and mutual respect. We can't build unity off the backs of others. We can build unity if we're willing to admit the consequences of structural oppression. We can build unity by caring for our neighbors. King called on each of us to be responsible for creating a more just and peaceful society, that African Americans, quote, hold only one key to the double lock of peaceful change. The other is in the hands of the white community. Let's recommit ourselves in service to Dr. King's dream in building a more just and lasting peace. We all have roles to play.
Thank you so much. And what a beautiful backdrop, Ms. Mooney, as we celebrate this occasion. Now, we will hear remarks from esteemed members of the Congressional Black Caucus. They will appear in order. Congressman Emanuel Cleaver II, Missouri's 5th District, he represents. Also, Congressman Arndrea D. Carson of Indiana's 7th Congressional District. And lastly, Congresswoman Karen Ruth Bass. She is California's 37th Congressional District Representative.
Hello, this is Emanuel Cleaver. I represent Missouri's 5th Congressional District in the Congress of the United States. With the horrid events that took place in and around January 6th, I am reminded afresh how Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s commitment to democracy and its lasting significance must be constantly nourished by those of us who followed him. Just as Dr. King's nonviolent teachings were tested time and time again by the defenders of racial segregation, our country's democratic institutions have faced a daunting challenge. Our democratic institutions have never been challenged the way they've been challenged over the past 4 years. Now, that's not a political statement. That's not a partisan statement. That is a statement of fact. And I think as the days and months go by, when we find out things from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, from the National Intelligence Administration, from the National Park Rangers and the Secret Service, Americans are going to be stunned. How do I know that? Because agents who are conducting the investigation right now have already said that we're going to be stunned to find out what happened. You know, in the days of Dr. King, Dr. King stood up for nonviolence, even in the face of people like Bull Connor, Orville Faubus, George Wallace. And he did so because he actually believed that the power of nonviolence would always win over the power of violence. And I remember my first opportunity to participate in the civil rights movement. I was 15 years old, and I led the march as my local newspaper, Wichita Falls Times records, 50 stupid kids who followed me downtown. All of us could have been killed, to desegregate the 3 movie theaters in a city of 106,000 people. That, of course, launched my civil rights career. I was happy to be able to go down to the South, and the first Selma March, which was not the march that most people know about. The first march was actually turned around. I was not there on the Bloody Sunday. But Dr. King was the kind of man who believed that we had to be nonviolent so that when Americans looked at the television set, there would be no difficulty for them to find out the good guys and the bad guys. Now, for the hardened bigots and racists, it wouldn't matter. But for a lot of decent Americans who were just naive, this was an opportunity for them to say, as they said back in those days, oh my goodness, I hate to believe that this is our country. And so it is not only fitting that Dr. King has earned himself a permanent memorial on the National Mall. His likeness, carved into stone, stands just a short walk away from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, where he told us about his dreams some 60 years ago. And as we gather now to honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s what would have been his 92nd birthday, it is with a common understanding that his dream is still ongoing work, and we've got to continue to protect that dream and push and promote that dream. But as we step into a new year, I have a feeling that we will bend just a little bit closer toward justice. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Congressman Arndrea Carson from the Hoosier State. I am pleased to be with you today as we commemorate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and celebrate this day of service. Dr. King's unprecedented and altruistic advocacy for equality, justice, and basic human rights cultivated a positive transformation in our nation's capital and cultural landscape. His march for justice gave way for America to escape the confining and inhumane grips of segregation. His push for enhanced voting rights and basic civil liberties has made America a more welcoming and promising homeland for our varying and diverse constituencies. Through his many good deeds and outstanding pursuits, he showed us all that we must never falter in our ongoing quest for parity, fairness, and a better tomorrow. Dr. King was our national treasure. Despite being confronted with often ruthless hatred, Dr. King remained a loving example of nonviolence, thereby elevating spirituality and everything that was great about being a peaceful person. The 10th anniversary of this memorial comes at a fitting moment in our nation's history. While we have witnessed incredible social progress in the decades since Dr. King's death, we have also seen an unforgettable resurgence of rhetoric, divisiveness, and even violence. It is in this time we must remember his words of love and unity. As Dr. King said, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate can't drive out hate. Only love can do that. It is my hope that the 10th anniversary of the Dr. King Memorial on the National Mall will bring renewed attention to Dr. King's clarion call for peaceful and positive action. By devoting ourselves to inclusive discourse and public service, we can pass Dr. King's encouraging message into future generations of Americans. And as our tenured democracy continues to age and progress, we can ensure that they too might prosper in a world guided by peace, tolerance, and understanding. Thank you.
10 years ago, I was at the dedication of the King Memorial. It's hard to believe all that has happened in 10 years. But 10 years ago, our nation was in the midst of a crisis. 10 years ago, we had our first Black president. And on this King Day, we are hours away from having the inauguration of the first woman and the first Black woman Vice President of the United States. It will be such an exciting day to see the inauguration and the beginning of the Biden-Harris administration and the end of 4 very difficult years in our country. We're in the middle of dealing with an economic crisis and a health crisis. And I think about what would Dr. King say about the events that have taken place in our country over the last couple of weeks. There would be sadness with the fact that white supremacy is raging in our country. There would be sadness that there's a pandemic that is raging in our country, but he would be filled with hope and optimism at all of the hundreds of thousands of young activists that are involved in fighting for social and economic justice. And it proves once again what he always says, the arc of history always bends towards justice.
Thank you so much, representatives. You serve us all well. Now, it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Willis Lonser III, the General President of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity, Incorporated.
Greetings. I'm Willis Lonser, General President of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity, Incorporated. I'm very happy to participate virtually in the 10th annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Wreath laying ceremony. The men of Alpha Phi Alpha join along with our nation in celebrating the 92nd birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I'm very happy to report that Dr. King was a member of our fraternity, and he would have celebrated this year his 69th year of membership, as he was initiated in 1952. The men of Alpha Phi Alpha remain committed to supporting the Memorial Foundation, and we are proud founding sponsors of the Build the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Project. As you continue in your celebration today, we stand along with you in committing to fulfilling and keeping the dream of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Have a great day.
Thank you so much. As we continue to hear from our esteemed members of Congress and the members of the Congressional Black Caucus, please help me welcome in this order of appearance Congressman Stephen Horsford of Nevada's 4th Congressional District, Congresswoman Nikema Williams of the mighty state of Georgia's 5th Congressional District, and lastly, Congresswoman Lisa Blunt, Rochester of Delaware's at-large Congressional District.
Good morning. I'm deeply honored to join you today as we celebrate the life and legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King was a thunderous voice for justice. When he spoke, he gave voice and hope to millions who had been silenced by oppression and fear. During the March for Integrated Schools in 1959, Dr. King called upon us to be the change that we want to see in this world. He said, "Make a career of humanity. Commit yourself to the noble struggle for equal rights. You will make a better person of yourself, a greater nation." So relevant. Let us take from his example. This morning, we are virtually gathered together to recognize the 10th anniversary of this memorial, which stands as a reminder of our responsibility to make our country more equitable and just. As the first Black member of Congress from Nevada, this memorial reminds me that Dr. King paved the way for me and others to join the hallowed halls of Congress. And it makes me think of his most famous quote, that the arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice. He knew, and we know today, that it does not bend by itself. So today, I call on each of you to have the audacity to dream of a better, fairer future, and to work hand in hand until that dream is achieved.
I'm Congresswoman Nikema Williams, representing Georgia's 5th Congressional District. Thank you to the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Foundation for asking me to join you for this virtual wreath-laying ceremony. Although we can't physically be together, I'm honored to celebrate the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. with each of you on this 10th anniversary of the King Monument on the National Mall. I am proud every day, but today in particular, that I am the Congresswoman for Atlanta, the birthplace of Dr. King. In times like these, it is imperative that we continue to remember Dr. King's message of democracy, justice, hope, and love. Having spaces like the Martin Luther King Jr. Monument ensures we have living monuments of Dr. King's legacy. On January 6th, domestic terrorists launched an attack on the United States Capitol, our capital, in an attempt to overturn the results of the election. The power in Black and minority voters turning out in record-shattering numbers was just too much for them to bear. We saw just how far we have to go before the day when, as Dr. King noted of his dream for this country, every American is judged not by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. We can only defeat the dangerous ideologies perpetuated by the terrorists by recommitting to Dr. King's message of nonviolence. We must remember his dream and remain steadfast in our mission to improve the lives of working families and demand social justice in our communities. And all of us here have a duty to honor Dr. King and speak up in the face of injustice. As Dr. King wrote in the letter from the Birmingham jail, we'll have to repent in this generation, not merely for the hateful words and actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence of the good people. We've accomplished much over the last year while living through a global pandemic. In Dr. King's home state of Georgia, we came together as a multiracial community and sent the first Black man, Reverend Raphael Warnock, and the first Jewish man, John Ossoff, to represent Georgia in the United States Senate. And on Tuesday, we'll have the first Black woman inaugurated as the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris. We're bringing Dr. King's dream to fruition, but there is still work to be done. Representing the 5th Congressional District, succeeding the late Congressman John Lewis, it is my honor and privilege to carry out his vision to build multiracial coalitions that come together for the common good. And it is my duty to bring Dr. King's dream of creating a greater sense of unity among all humans to fruition. The King Monument in our nation's capital serves as an inspiration to all of America to make our country more equitable and just. Best wishes for a successful virtual ceremony. Continue to be the examples of Dr. King's dream by addressing social injustices and encouraging community involvement. Next year, when it is safe to do so again, we can celebrate in person, and hopefully we'll be able to say that we're one step closer to the country that Dr. King envisioned for all of us. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Congresswoman Lisa Blunt Rochester from the state of Delaware, and I'm proud to join you all for the annual wreath laying at the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial. It's been a decade since Dr. King's Memorial first opened on the National Mall, serving as a constant reminder of Dr. King's message of democracy, justice, hope, and love. These principles resonate with us today more than ever. Dr. King's visage, along with his words memorialized in granite, remind us that out of a mountain of despair, he is our stone of hope.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Well, as the oldest son of the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Mrs. Coretta Scott King, Martin Luther King III has seized the torch lit by his parents and is continuing their quest for equality and justice for all people. He is a global civil rights leader, whether speaking to an audience in Mozambique or Mississippi, Israel, or Indiana. His vision for the future has touched thousands. Mr. King's dedication to creating and also implementing strategic, nonviolent action to rid the world of social, political, and economic injustice has propelled him to the forefront as one of the nation's most ardent advocates for the poor, the oppressed, and the disillusioned. Now, it is my pleasure and it is truly my honor to welcome Martin Luther King III and his lovely wife, Arndrea Waters King.
I'm Martin Luther King III.
And I'm Arndrea Waters King. It certainly is a distinct honor and pleasure to be with you today as we celebrate and observe the National Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. As a family, the National Memorial is one of the most special places to us. I remember 10 years ago when it first opened, us bringing our daughter there. And she looked around and she took a breath and she looked some more and she said, "This is awesome." And I think that for a 3-year-old who never had the opportunity to meet her grandparents, she is like so many of her generation, where this memorial is a beacon of peace, of justice, of love in a world that is too often devoid of those very principles. So we are thankful to Harry Johnson, to the Alphas for having built the memorial, and to everyone that's participating in today's program.
You know, we cannot say enough about Harry Johnson and his leadership and the team that he constructed to actually get the memorial built. To my Alpha brothers who helped to raise money, as well as all of the corporate support that came from around our nation, we certainly are grateful. Because now when people come, and this now is being the 10th year, people have been coming to Washington for 10 years, looking at memorials of presidents and war memorials. But for 10 years, there also has been a memorial erected to a man of peace, a man of nonviolence, a man of compassion, a man that our world looks to for how we create the beloved community. And so today, on this virtual program for this King holiday, we want to say thank you to Harry Johnson and the Memorial Foundation. Thank you for helping us keep the dream alive.
What a pleasure to hear from the man that not only carries the name, but also the mission of the late, great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Right now, Reverend Dr. Granger Browning Jr. I've seen all the shout outs in the chat and people waiting to hear from Pastor Browning Jr. He is the senior pastor of Ebenezer African Methodist Episcopal AME Church of Fort Washington, Maryland, where the Right Reverend Dr. James LeVert Davis is the presiding bishop of the 2nd Episcopal District, and the Reverend Dr. Braxton is the presiding elder of the Potomac District. He's married to the Reverend Dr. Joanne Browning. He was appointed pastor of Ebenezer AME Church in 1983 with a membership of 17 and a budget of $12,000. But under his leadership for the last 30 years, the church membership has grown to exceed more than 8,000 members and ministers to the spiritual, educational, political, social, economic, and health needs of the community. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome the Reverend Dr. Browning Jr.
God bless you today. I want to thank the Lord for this singular honor of being able to minister before you on today. And I want to give a special word of thanksgiving to Dr. Harry Johnson. Dr. Johnson is an alpha, and it's seldom that an alpha is so highly complimented by an omega. But all joking aside, I just want to say thank you to him and the men of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity to leading this nation so this glorious monument to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. could take place. And then from that, we want to thank all the persons that are involved with the Martin Luther King Jr. Foundation, all the staff persons and all the supporters. Once again, I'm honored and blessed to be able to stand before you today as the speaker. I also want to thank in a very special way my wife, co-pastor Joanne Browning of Ebenezer African Methodist Episcopal Church in Fort Washington, Maryland, as well as our children and grandchildren, all who are praying for us, and the Ebenezer AME Church family who are praying as well. But also I want to thank my bishop, Bishop James Davis, and Episcopal Supervisor Aurelius Davis for their support and love as well. So let's just go to God in a word of prayer. Eternal God, our Father, in these challenging and turbulent times, we want to say thank you that the dream and legacy of Dr. King is still alive. So on today, we ask that you guide and direct everything that is said so that the beloved community that we're believing that shall come to pass will be in our midst, and we'll hold on to that faith and dream that the best is yet to come. And I pray in Jesus' name, amen. Every preacher is supposed to take a text, whether we use it or not is something else, but we are supposed to take a text. And my text today comes from the very last book of the Bible, Revelations. And it's Revelations, the 21st chapter and the first verse and the second verse. And we see these words. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And I, John, saw the holy city, a new Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared one for her husband. I want you to focus with me on our theme today. We did it, Joe. We did it. John the Revelator is writing during the time of a pandemic. His pandemic is a religious pandemic. For the Christians during this time refused to say Caesar is Lord. And so because of that, the Roman government oppressed the Christians. And in the midst of this pandemic, John began to reimagine what the world would be like after this pandemic was over. And so now, we too are in the midst of a pandemic. Our pandemic is not one that is so much religious, but one that is based on a health pandemic and a political pandemic. And many of us, as like John 2,000 years ago, we are reimagining what life is going to be like after the pandemic is over. We are reimagining what our schools are going to be like. We are reimagining what our jobs are going to be like. We are reimagining what our way of working and recreating and shopping and all the things that we normally used to do, what it's going to be like. We're reimagining what our places of worship are going to be like. And as we reimagine what all this new beginning is going to be like, we're putting a faith and a hope that even though times are challenging now, that things will get better. In 1955, Dr. King was also reimagining what his world was going to be like. He had just taken on the pastorate of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama, where the distinguished social justice advocate, Reverend Dr. Vernon Johns, had been the former pastor. And having gotten there, he was beginning to be a part of what was becoming the Montgomery bus boycott. And from there, he was beginning to reimagine what this former capital of the Confederacy, strongly under the oppression of apartheid and segregation, how it could be transformed into a beloved community. And so with this, Dr. King was reimagining how Montgomery and eventually the nation and the world could become different than what it was. This reimagining for Dr. King did not start in Montgomery, but it started with his mother and father at Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia. There, he heard his father, Daddy King, preach sermons and saw his father be involved in civil rights movement. And he began, even as a child, to reimagine what America could be. And then going to Morehouse University at the age of 15, under the tutelage of one of America's great educators, Dr. Benjamin Mays. Through him, he began to reimagine once again what America could be. And then at the age of 19, going to Crozier Theological Seminary in Chester, Pennsylvania. And there, a God moment took place Dr. Mordecai Johnson, the first Black president of Howard University, was just coming back from India, where he had met Mahatma Gandhi, who in the 1940s led nonviolent civil disobedient movements to take the British out of India. And in that God moment, he came and gave a lecture at Crozier, and there Dr. King sat, and he heard for the very first time what nonviolent civil disobedience could do. And he began to reimagine what that could be like. And then at the age of 24, going to Boston University to work on his PhD. And there he, along with Dr. Samuel Proctor, began to think about theologically and practically how America can be reimagined to become the beloved community that both of them hope to see. And so it was with that he went to Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, and there went to Montgomery, and there began to be a part of the early civil rights movement. But he was not there by himself. For once he got there, a woman by the name of Rosa Parks, a seamstress, a member of St. John AME Church in Montgomery, Alabama, but she was also the secretary of the Montgomery NAACP. And she too began to reimagine what America could be. And then when she saw Emmett Till, who had been murdered in Mississippi at the young age of 13 in 1954, and because of Emmett Till's mother's courage, that she did not keep her son's casket closed, but she opened it up so that the world could see his mangled body. And when Rosa Parks saw that mangled body of this 13-year-old young man, Emmett Till, on the cover of Jet magazine, she began to reimagine what America could be. And so on that day in December, she kept her seat on the bus. And it was not by accident, but was by intent and with a quiet strength that she did that. And with that, she began to inspire others to reimagine what America could be. But not only she, I thank God that Dr. King, a few years before, had married Coretta Scott King, who was a student at the New England Conservatory of Music while Dr. King was at Boston University. And Coretta Scott King had grown up in Marion, Alabama, and she had seen her family's life work being destroyed by racists in a fire where they burned down all of the family business. She could have been bitter, but I thank the Lord that some Quakers took her under their wing and got her into Antioch College in Ohio. And there at Antioch, it was only one of two schools that required nonviolence as a course that had to be studied. And so with this marriage, Dr. King and Coretta Scott King had a God moment. And it was really Coretta Scott King who mentored Dr. King in nonviolence. That's why she came out against the war in Vietnam even before he did, because she was grounded in nonviolence. But not only that, Andrew Young in 1955 met Dr. King while he was speaking at Talladega College. And there, Andrew Young spoke about his wife, who Dr. King did not realize had grown up with his wife. I'm connecting the dots now. And as we connect the dots, Jean Young, now deceased, was a case by which she too had seen her family's life savings and life careers and goals having been destroyed in Marion, Alabama. And it was a case by which the same persons got her in Manchester College. And Manchester was the other school that had nonviolence as a course that was required. So she was able to push Andrew Young in the position of nonviolence. So these two women working behind the scenes were the ones that encouraged their husbands to become leaders in the nonviolent civil disobedient movement. But not only she, it was a case by which John Lewis, and from Troy, Alabama, just 50 miles from Montgomery, had heard of Dr. King and was becoming inspired to reimagine what America could be. And then as a student at Fisk University, he heard Rosa Parks speak. And from that, this reimagination began to take form. And then shortly after that, he heard Dr. King. And shortly after that, he began to get involved in the civil rights movement. But not only that, Reverend Jesse Jackson, a senior, was a student at North Carolina A&T, where Dr. Samuel Proctor was president. And Reverend Dr. Proctor had told Dr. King about this young student government leader who is leading protests in Greensboro, North Carolina. And so it was a case when Reverend Jesse Jackson went to Morehouse to speak as a student leader. Dr. King was there, and to his surprise, Dr. King knew who he was. And from those conversations, Reverend Jackson was able to reimagine what America could be. And from those persons, Andrew Young, reimagining what America could be, became mayor of Atlanta, congressman from Georgia, and ambassador to the United Nations. John Lewis, because he was reimagining what America could be, became a congressman from Georgia. Not only that, was the conscience of the Congress. Reverend Jesse Jackson, because he was reimagining what America could be, ran for president in 1984 and almost became the Democratic Party's nominee in 1988. These persons, along with Dr. King, began to reimagine, and so many others, what America could be. So it was on August 28th, 1963, that Dr. King stood before the nation and shared with the nation how he was reimagining America becoming. And he said, I have a dream that one day the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners would join hands as brothers and sisters. I have a dream that one day my 4 little children would not be in a country that they judge by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream that one day black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual. Free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last. And from that speech, America began to get a glimpse of how Dr. King reimagined what America could be. But anytime you start to reimagine, anytime you have dreams, anytime you have a vision for what can be, there are persons who also want to make your dreams into a nightmare. And sadly, within a month, 4 little precious girls were bombed to death at the 16th Street Baptist Church. And it would seem like that reimagining of what America could be might die. But I'm so glad to tell you that when you will reimagine anything, that cannot die. Truth thrust to the earth shall rise again. Yes, your dreams may be bloody. Yes, your dreams may be injured. Yes, your dreams may be bruised, but they cannot die. So that's why on April 3rd, 1968, Dr. King refused to allow his dream, his reimagining of America to die. And he hewed out of a mountain of despair a stone of hope. And he came before those persons in Memphis, Tennessee on that day and said, some of you heard about some of the threats against me from my sick white brethren, but that doesn't concern me now. I just want to do God's will. And God's allowed me to go over and look over into the promised land. I might not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight, we as a people will get to the promised land. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man, for my eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. Yes, Dr. King held on to the fact that he was reimagining what America could be. And someone might be asking, what was the promised land that Dr. King saw? Well, I believe it's the same promised land that Moses saw on the top of Mount Sinai. When Moses looked to his left, he saw the oppression that he had left out of Egypt. He saw the wilderness that he had come from. But when he looked to his right, he saw the promised land that he was going to. I don't know about you, but those of us who are reimagining America, yes, we've come out of oppression, and yes, we've come out of a wilderness, but I believe that the best is yet to come, and there is a promised land ahead. Well, how can you say that, Pastor Browning? Well, I can say that because on August 28th, 1963, as Dr. King stood before America, behind him was the Lincoln Memorial. In front of him was the Washington Memorial. To his right was the Jefferson Memorial. And he could never have imagined that to his left one day would be a memorial not to a president, but to a prophet. I still have hope because on that day, 45 years later, August 28th, 2008, the son of a former slave symbolically and the son of a former slave owner symbolically joined hands. Who would ever have thought it was the son of the former slave that would be the president and the son of the former slave owner would be the vice president? Obama became president of these United States. How do you still believe that we can still reimagine, because the pastor who stands in the legacy of Daddy King and Dr. King, our friend and brother, Reverend Dr. Raphael Warnock, became the first black congressman and senator from the state of Georgia. I still have hope that we can reimagine. How can you still have hope? Because symbolically, the son of a former slave owner, Joseph Biden, took hands of a daughter of a former slave, Vice President Kamala Harris. And when they joined hands and when the election was over and they became president and vice president-elect, Kamala Harris shared to the world as she talked to President-elect Joe Biden, and she said, "We did it, Joe.
We did it. We did it, Joe. You're going to be the next president of the United States."
We did it, Joe. We did it, Joe. That's what, when you hold on to what you believe God can do, when you continue to reimagine what God can do, you'll be able to say, like Vice President Kamala Harris, "We did it. We did it." That's why today I believe the saints of the ages are saying to each other, "They did it. They did it." I can see and hear Harriet Tubman looking at Sojourner Truth saying, "Sojourner, they did it, Sojourner. They did it." I can hear Denmark Vesey telling Nat Turner, "They did it, Nat. They did it." I can hear Richard Allen telling Henry McNeil Turner, "They did it, Henry. They did it." I can hear Nelson Mandela telling Mahatma Gandhi, "They did it, Mahatma. They did it." I can hear Mordecai Johnson telling Dr. Benjamin Mays, "They did it, Benjamin. They did it." And I can hear Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. telling John the Revelator, "They did it, John. They did it." When you hold on to a faith and continue to reimagine what America can be, eyes cannot see it, ears cannot hear it, and your mind can't comprehend what God is getting ready to do. And even if they try to put your dreams and they crucify them, even though they try to put your dreams into a pit or a prison or a jail, even when they try to bury your dreams, as a Christian, I believe that truth plus to the earth shall rise again. And whatever they try to put down shall come back up again. And I believe whatever faith you are, whatever religion you are, if you hold on to God's unchanging hands, then eyes have not seen, ears have not heard, and you can't imagine what God is getting ready to do if you simply continue to reimagine what God has done. And future generations will talk about us and say, "They did it. They did it. They did it." God bless you today. And we thank the Lord as we celebrate the 92nd birthday of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I still believe that his beloved community shall come to pass. God bless you today.
Thank you, Pastor Browning, for those inspirational and thought-provoking words. We're always blessed when you speak to us. Thank you so much. We hope that our listening and watching audience will take to heart those very words that you spoke so eloquently. And now we shall hear from the world-renowned Ebenezer AME Church Choir. Following the choir, we then prepare to lay our wreath. We generally lay a wreath on Dr. King's holiday and symbolism of what he meant to our country and an honor for what he has done for our country and for so many people, not just here in the United States, but worldwide. So please join us as we lay the wreath in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Rejoice in
the pleasure to present to you Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will they be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream.
Oh, there is so much to unpack in what we just witnessed from the pastor's stirring words. We did it, didn't we? To that rousing rendition of Lift Every Voice and Sing. Preach, preacher, and sing, choir. No virus, no hate, no discrimination can diminish the power of love that this day represents. And as one of the comments said, better is coming. Before closing, just a little bit of business as I dry my tears here in gratitude and thankfulness. We also have to thank our long and sustaining who never, ever get the recognition they truly deserve, nor they really want. But we thank Sandra Evers Manley and Northrop Grumman for their long-standing support with remembering a king, Dr. Martin Luther King. And I'd like to thank everybody who joined this wonderful, this festive, this joyful celebration today as we honor the life and the legacy of a king. And I'd also like to invite you to follow the Memorial Foundation on all the social media platforms that are out there. And also please head over to the foundation's YouTube page right now to watch Love and Light, a tribute to Dr. King. Now we welcome once again the Reverend Dr. Browning for our closing prayer.
Let's bow our heads in a word of prayer. Eternal God, our Father, we come today thanking you that we shall overcome. Deep in our hearts, we do believe that we shall overcome. And we believe it because you are on our side. And because you're on our side, no weapon formed against us shall prosper. We're believing as we celebrate the 92nd birthday of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., that reimagined, beloved community that he believed would come to pass. We stand committed to make it happen. So give us the courage of our foremothers and forefathers, not to back up, but to go forward. And we're still believing the dream he had and the vision he had of America becoming that promised land, it shall still come to pass. We thank you for what you have done. We thank you for what you are doing. But most of all, we want to say thank you that better is coming. I pray in the name of Jesus that the people of God say amen and amen.
I would like to say thank you for all of you who tuned in and watched us this morning on the birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. What a wonderful and glorious opportunity for us to honor this man of peace. At this time, I would like to invite you to join us on our YouTube channel as we continue this celebration in honor of Dr. King with our Light and Love, a tribute to Dr. Martin Luther King program.